Welcome to the Vision of Leadership podcast. I'm your host, Ted McElroy. This podcast is dedicated to helping you find your wins, have a better quality of life, and become the best leader you can be. Hey, have you subscribed to this podcast yet? Don't miss an episode. They're worth every single thing you paid for them, which is nothing because they're free. I invite you to subscribe to the podcast by hitting the subscribe button. Give us a rating and a review on your specific podcast player. This helps us with our podcast rankings and makes it easier for people to find us. And as always, please support those who help support us. On episode 102 of this podcast, Chris interviewed Justin Kwan, Michelle Andrews, and Richard Ruth. They pointed out that as a profession, we have done a great job of letting our patients know that myopia is not a big deal. If you can see 20/20, there is no worry. It is the high myopes that are in more danger. And as they said, that message is tragic. Any myopia has a higher risk of maculopathy, glaucoma, and earlier cataract development. In the MiSight one-day clinical trials, only 4% of study participants who got ProClear one-days stayed stable in their myopia progression over the 3-year period. That means you can confidently say, parent, by not going to a system geared to slow the myopia progression, there is a 96% chance your child's vision will get worse. This may take away some of the choice your child has in the future as to how they will correct their vision. Choice, not fear of the disease associations with myopia, is what best resonates with parents when it comes to myopia control for their children. And with CooperVision's MiSight One Day, we now have an FDA-approved single-use contact lens to lessen the progression of myopia in our patients. Contact your CooperVision representative to find out more about MiSight One Day contact lenses.
Your eyes and your vision are under attack, damaging blue light from the sun. Your phone, your computer, your tablet, even light bulbs and car headlights is constantly bombarding you. The good news is our eyes actually already have a line of defense to counter the effects of blue light. This defense is made up of 3 pigments called carotenoids. MacuHealth with MicroMicelle, the only supplement with the exclusive patent on all 3 macular carotenoids and MicroMicelle technology.
Hi, I want to talk to you for just a moment about a great lens that we are using in our practice. It is the Verilex XR design lens. And the reason we love it is because of what it's doing for our guests in our practice. Don't get me wrong. Verilex has been making great lenses for years, and I'm sure they're going to have one better than this eventually. But the Verilex XR design and the Verilex XR track are truly making lives better for my guests in my practice. When I'm talking to them about it in the practice, I basically say this. I say, there's a lot of progressive lenses that you've had where you've had a little bit of a challenge. You kind of got to figure out exactly where that reading spot, that sweet spot is on your lens. Well, with this lens, they figured out a way of how to put the in-between vision and the near vision in the same place. And the reason they do that is because they take into account a lot of specific measurements about you, including the fact that we've got this special computer. It's basically based on an iPad. I don't go into all of that, called an iRuler 2. That'll take more or less a 3D rendering of how your eye sits on that lens. What that does for you is keep you from having to figure out where to look through that lens. And that's going to make you a lot more happy with your life. Not to mention the fact, can't you imagine what it's going to be like to go home and your eyes still feel good? And for those people who are dealing with a little bit more challenge, I also recommend doing the XR track. The reason I like this very much is because it's actually watching the way eyes move. Through using the iRuler program, they'll hold the iPad and they'll watch these dots go around, and it truly maps the way the eye moves. That comes up with a really good formulation of how they can perfect this lens and make the vision work better. So if you really want to know more about the Verilex XR lens line, please get with your Essilor account representative as soon as possible. Thank you. Hello and welcome to the Vision of Leadership podcast. I'm Ted McElroy, the host, and today your episode is just me. It's just going to be me talking about what's been kind of going on in my life in the last few months. I've been absent, I know, and I apologize for that, not just to you, but mostly to me, because I really enjoy doing this. It's something that I've gotten a lot of satisfaction out of. It kind of helps me download my thoughts, and I get a chance to learn from a lot of people. This episode, however, is going to be more talking about some of the learnings that I've got from myself, and hopefully sharing something that'll be helpful to you. And if it is, please put a review and maybe some questions in the reviewer of your choice or whatever platform you're using, whether it's Apple Podcast or Spotify or whatever. There's lots of different ways to get this program. But today we're going to really kind of talk about change, imperfection, vulnerability, and imposter syndrome, which is kind of where I've been going for a while. So the season of my life, first of all, I need to say thank you to Chris and Aaron for allowing me to have some time to kind of think. I know that I'm not one of the pillars of this platform, but I do feel like I'm kind of helping keep one of the legs of the three-legged stool up a little bit. My leg's just a lot shorter, perhaps, than theirs is. And part of this is because of some changes that have taken place. For the last 5 years, up until December 31st of 2023, I've been a basically two-doctor practice with a wonderful associate, Dr. Julia Harrison. I couldn't thank her more for the time that we got a chance to spend together. But she started looking at buying a practice about the time that we started realizing that our partnership was less important than our friendship. We had been in negotiations for trying to get our partnership going, and it just didn't happen. In fact, at one point, there was a lot of frustration between the two of us. And I sat down with her on the phone as I was driving back from a meeting I was at in Valdosta, which is a little bit south of here. And I said, hey, I just want to talk with you about some things and just chat. And I said, what it came down to at the very end was, look, if this deal doesn't make sense to you, don't take it. Because if this deal doesn't make sense to me, I'm not going to take it either. And I think that spoke to her. I think that's where kind of things started saying that this probably wasn't going to work out for her. And that's fine. I'm very happy for her. I'm sad for me. I miss her. I miss working with her. I miss having the opportunity to talk about things with a colleague. It's hard to go on vacation. I'm going to be out of town for the next 9 days, starting tomorrow. And there's not really going to be anybody in my office seeing guests. So that's going to make things a little more challenging as far as I have to get somebody to take call for me. I had to sweat over and pray over a couple of patients that I'm kind of worried about. I had another lady that I saw yesterday who had a horrific corneal issue going on. And she was leaving yesterday at 11 o'clock last night to fly to Italy. And the best I could do was kind of just bandage her together because she didn't want to miss her trip. And I'm praying that what I did helped and is working. So it's something I'm worried about, but I'm praying about it. And I'm hoping that, God's going to do his healing powers and take care of everything, because I know it's not me that's really making it happen. It's him that's making it happen. But this change in my life, it's made things kind of weird for me. I did a lot of snap judgment type kind of things where I just decided I'm out. I'm quitting. I'm not doing things. And some of that caused some weird stuff to happen. So what I learned was not making these snap judgments to, okay, something has changed. Something's occurred differently. So before you make any rash decisions, sit down for a moment. Think about it. Sort of go through the process of what I should do. And I should have done a vulnerability exercise of where am I vulnerable right now? And what kind of changes are going to take place? But the more important lesson is, what does this make possible? How is this going to improve things for me? One of the things that I'm going through right now is the fact that my son is going through an optometry school, and he's hopefully going to be graduating here in about 2 years, which means he'll be joining me in 2 years. Well, many years ago, I was going through the chairs at the Georgia Optometric Association. And right before I became president, my then associate opted to leave. And that left me with no one during my presidency. I was out of the office a lot that year due to legislative issues, meetings, board processes, things, all these kind of things, going to different districts and just getting to meet the optometrist in those areas. I did that for a year by myself. One of the best years we've ever had financially in our practice. And then as we approached 2016, I was going through the chairs at SECO. And again, my associate left. She and her husband decided to move back to Texas to be closer to family. And that left me with nobody, which was devastatingly frightening. And we had a really good year. It wasn't probably one of the best years I've ever had, but we were profitable and we did quite well. Last weekend, I'm on my way to our Georgia Optometric Association meeting in South Carolina. Now, that sounds weird. Georgia never has our meetings in Georgia except for the fall meeting. But the big meeting in the summer is always like either in South Carolina or Florida or occasionally in Georgia, but not very often. And we're probably about 45 minutes away from the destination. And I looked at my wife and I said, hey, what was the year that Dr. Wynn left the practice to go back to Texas? Was this 2016? And she goes, yeah, it was right as you were beginning your presidency for SECO. I said, we made it through that okay. She said, yeah, you did. I said, this is going to be nothing. I mean, it's going to be something, but it's not going to be the difficulty that we went through. So these rash decisions sometimes need to not take place because it puts things in motion that you won't have any control over if you put sometimes things in motion for. And sometimes stuff just happens. The one lesson I think I've learned in my career is there's always going to be a problem. There's always going to be some kind of issue or challenge you've got to go through. And I think that's actually what really makes the good stuff a lot better. I'm not trying to be Pollyanna. I'm not trying to, find all the silver linings and all the gray clouds here. But what I am trying to say is the lessons that we learn from these difficulties and these challenges are way more beneficial than the stuff that happens during the good times. So the fact that I'm doing something that's a little bit imperfect and working through some challenges, and I can't wait to see what's going to happen on the other side of this. I'm also learning to make sure that my business is going to run without me, because this is a different way. I mean, it was easier, obviously, when there was another doctor in the practice, when Julia was there. But now she's got her own practice. And again, I'm very excited for her. But the really cool part about it is, and she told me as she was leaving, she says, I can't wait to take the lessons that I've learned from you and put those into place in my own practice. And I hope that not only is she going to learn some lessons from that, but also she's going to take some of the lessons that she brought from my practice and tells me how they didn't work out. So maybe we'll be able to learn some things for our own practice that way. It's also about experimentation with change. I think that's the thing that really gets to be the biggest problem, is because we look at change as change alone. It's like I've got to go from point A to point B and there's no transition period. And we don't think through that part of it enough. But I think something that I learned from Michael Hyatt when I was going through his Business Accelerator program with the Full Focus Network was the art of experimentation and couching change in that way. We're getting ready to do a new process in our business right now, trying to maybe improve our annual sales of contact lenses. And one of the things that most businesses will go to is looking to discounts and cutting things, when actually what a thing that might be better is, instead of cutting the price of something, is instead adding something to it, like a gift of some sort. This is a free gift with purchase. I've seen my wife with the makeup that she uses. I think L'Oreal does this a lot, and not L'Oreal, Lancome. Lancome does this a lot, where it's a free gift with purchase. She'll buy her base, and they've got this other kind of package. And some of the stuff you get in there is really, truly worthless. I mean, it doesn't look like her color, but some of the things that are in there are very good. But what they're doing is they're taking a lot of their excess inventory and they're putting that into this free gift with purchase. They're just eliminating some of the things. Well, I'm not going to quite go that route, but we do have a product that we use in our office called Pure and Clean. It's hypochlorous solution, and it comes in a hand sanitizer. And it's way safer than using these alcohol-based hand sanitizers. I mean, you could spray it in your eye and it wouldn't cause a problem. Matter of fact, hypochlorous solution is something you should probably use in your eye on a regular basis. But what we're going to be doing is figuring out a way to, when someone buys an annual supply of contact lenses, we will give them basically an equivalent of about a 3-month supply of hand sanitizer that they'll spray on their hands to use to clean their hands. And the nice thing about using this over using, say, soap, is they don't have to worry about making sure they got it all rinsed off, or using the alcohol-based hand sanitizer of having to wait for it to dry off and really completely get it done before you put your contact lens in and burn your cornea. So what we're doing is we're setting up this process of doing these things. And I said, okay, let's just try an experiment for 3 months and see how this works. If it works really well, fantastic. If it doesn't work, well, then maybe we need to consider doing something else. Maybe we need to try another process or something. apologize for the building there. It was one of the other imperfect things we're doing with the podcast today. I forgot to set the focus on my computer. But the one thing I think I've learned about change is the only thing in life that's probably never going to change is everything's going to change. So you probably should start looking for change and figuring out, what does this make possible? What's the lesson I'm going to learn out of this? How can I improve myself through this change that I wasn't looking for, but came anyway? The next thing I want to deal with is perfection. I am a perfectionist. My name is Ted McElroy, and I have to do it perfectly. In fact, I'm a little bit CDO, which is OCD spelled alphabetically the way it's supposed to be. I had someone tell me one time, Ted, you're so perfect. There has to be a place for everything and a thing for every place. And I really didn't think much about it until I got finished getting Bull to explain this to me. And I thought, wow, he's right. And it's kept me from doing a lot of things that I probably should have done, and I could have done better had I just dealt with the perfection and moved on. I had another colleague one time say, one of his team members said, Dr. So-and-so, why isn't good enough good enough? And he said, because it's not. And at the moment, I kind of knew what he was talking about. He was in the pursuit of excellence, but I think he was looking at it from the pursuit of excellence only for the excellence itself, that there couldn't be any flaws along the way. And I think when we do that for our teams and for ourselves, we're setting ourselves up for a possibility of maybe procrastinating too long because we can't do it until it's just right, or we can't let anybody fail, which basically means they're going to be afraid to do things in the way that really might benefit. They feel so constricted by and they're going to constantly be coming and saying, well, how do I do this? I need you to tell me exactly how to do this, because I don't want to do this in a way that's going to break the system, as opposed to letting them figuring out with an experiment how to break the system and make it better. One of the best things we can do as leaders is to empower our team to let them take roles of responsibility and to assign tasks and to delegate those tasks well. And that's a topic we're going to talk about here real soon in an upcoming episode, is about delegation and how I think delegation needs to work in a practice, with a lesson that I learned and pushing things through. But, we really shouldn't let perfect be getting in the way of getting things done. That's kind of like this episode today. I kind of decided I didn't have my microphone with me because I left it at the office. I'm not doing it in the best of locations. This is just a spare bedroom. The reason why is because our housekeeper is here today cleaning up with her grandson, and there's a lot of noise happening somewhere else. So this is the only room I knew they weren't going to be coming to. The lighting's not perfect. It's just kind of okay. I'm not trying to put some kind of special background. You can probably see stuff behind me that doesn't look quite right. That's okay. I wanted to get this episode done because I think it's important that I got it done to start getting my success going back in the right direction and get back to doing this thing that I really enjoy doing, which is podcasting. One of the other things about perfection and the change that I've been dealing with is my time. My time has greatly changed. I used to have 3.5 days of guest care and a day and a half of developmental things, whether it was developing my team, developing my Vision Source network, or developing myself. Now I've got 4.5 days of guest care and really like a half a day of development on my team. And I'm not been able to attend as much things as I like to for myself, for my Vision Source members. And I think that I start doing that and those kind of things, I'm not getting it scheduled. And things that get scheduled get done. Things that don't get scheduled, they might get done, but they probably won't. So it's important that we start scheduling these things. So why am I saying all this stuff right now? I did an episode with Adam Schmela back at the beginning of the year on vulnerability. And I may have talked about some of the stuff. I don't know. I've forgotten what all we talked about. I did listen to it. I'm one of those people that I do like to go back and listen to what I said, because somewhere along the way, someone's going to say, hey, Ted, do you remember when you said blah, blah, blah? And I'm going to go, I never said that. Well, some of the things I say are recorded and published. So I need to make sure I remember what I said. But I'll put a link to the episode in the show notes today, so you can go back and listen to it. And Adam did an amazing job at interviewing me and pulling out some of the things that I know. It wasn't the guest that was how good that episode when it was the host. I can promise you that. Yeah, I've learned some really cool stuff. Most of it's been by experience, and experience is a lot of times by mistakes. But I do think it was important to talk about what the vulnerability is about. And that's kind of what this episode's about, is about being vulnerable. It's important to be vulnerable because I think that's where self-awareness comes from. I think being vulnerable about what I don't know and what I'm dealing with and what I'm struggling with and all that kind of stuff is really important to talk about. And it lends a lot of human nature to me. For my team, that's important. If I always act like I'm perfect all the time, they're going to be a lot less reluctant, or a lot more reluctant to come and ask me any kind of advice. And I got to say, doing this episode right now is kind of struggling. I really would love to have someone on the other side of a screen here that I'm talking to that's asking me questions, instead of me having a couple of notes on the side that I've kind of put together and just free forming this thing. Saying it's okay not to be perfect is kind of hard. It's really difficult for me because I've always been trying to pursue perfection. It's about the kind of like what Lexa said many years ago. It's the relentless pursuit of perfection. I know I'll never get there, but I'm trying to get better every day. And there's a lot of forwards and backwards that happens through all of this. My golf game, for once, is a constant up and down thing. I work on it constantly. It's probably one of I would say I maybe have a little bit of an addiction to golf. I think about golf even when I'm not playing golf. I just love it. And I think part of it is this whole chase of perfection. It's no matter how good you get, you can always be a little bit better. I'll never be a professional golfer. I'm probably never going to be a club champion. My handicap is terrible. For those of you that understand handicaps, I'm a 26. So at least it's smaller than my waist size. But it's not good, and I've worked on it a lot. And I've watched it go up. I've watched it go down. It's never been much lower than a 26. And I've been playing since I was 12. So I should have gotten better by now. But when you say you need help, that's not a weakness. I think that actually is part of being this vulnerable person's admitting to yourself what you know you're good at and what you're not good at. And I've done all different types of assessments to figure it out. I think probably the best one I've done most recently is the Working Genius, which I got certified to do in May of 21. That was right when they first launched that. And I've done next to nothing with it other than what's done for my team. I've talked about it with my Vision Source members in my Vision Source group, and really hadn't done a whole lot else with it. And then I watch people like Pete Kehoe, who have gotten their certification after I did and really taken it somewhere. And I'm kind of jealous, but I'm not jealous because of what he's done. I'm mad more because of what I haven't done. I know a lot about it. If you ever have any questions about it, you can email me or whatever. I'll be glad to talk to you about it. But, Pete's putting it into practice a lot more probably than I am. So he's a much better person to talk to about it than me. Now, all of this kind of stuff, the change, the perfection, the vulnerability, it starts leading into something that's a little bit more problematic. Imposter syndrome. I'm not good enough. I can't do that. I'm not the right person for the job. And I think we all deal with this on a level, especially if you're a leader, because you spend more time comparing yourself to others and where they are, as opposed to where you are right now. You've heard Aaron and I talk about John Acuff a good bit, and he's a great writer, speaker. If you ever have a chance to get him to see him speak live, I would highly recommend it. But get into some of his resources. They're fantastic. And one of the books he's done, and Aaron's talked about this book, soundtracks. And there are all these things that play in our mind when we're kind of getting down on ourselves. And there's also great soundtracks we play when things are going really well. The soundtrack that I believe it was Dr. Dre, or maybe it was one of the other rappers. I'm going blank right now. Kanye West. That's who it was. It was Kanye West. He says, "I'm dope and I do dope shit." I think that's really something we all need to consider thinking about. The fact that we are pretty darn cool. And once you start thinking about it, you really do know a lot. The thing that you should be doing is doing something Andy Stanley talked about, which is pouring into someone else's cup. You've learned a lot of things, whether you know it or not. And once you start talking about it, you start realizing, hey, I actually do kind of know some stuff. So making yourself available to people for advice, but not just giving the advice and sitting back and waiting them for to come to it, but sharing your knowledge is really important. Because if you can continue to pour into someone else's cup, not only are you improving their life, you're actually learning more of what you thought you knew about what you know. You start putting it more into practice. You start really working it through and massaging it and making it more available. And I don't even know if this is making any sense or not, but it's amazing how much your knowledge will grow when you start teaching it to someone else. There's probably a better way. I could have said that in a lot shorter distance had I just not walked all the way around the bush on that one. But recently I was sitting with my mastermind group. I've got a wonderful group of people I get to sit down with on virtual meeting once a month. And we just talk about what's going on with our business and our life and how some of the struggles we're going through. The sad part is you got about 20 or 30 minutes usually to go through all that each month. We talk about what we had as a challenge last month. We talk about what our new challenge is that we're working on. And about 2 meetings ago, it would have been April. Yeah, I was struggling with the podcast, and it took me this long to get through it. I actually said, and I'm still struggling with this as one of my soundtracks. I don't think I've got anything that anybody wants to listen to. And that's a real imposter syndrome. Truth is, I've got things that people want to hear. In fact, I'm saying something right now. Before I came on to this episode and started taping, I prayed, God, there's someone who needs to hear what I got to say today. And I hope that they're listening to this right now. I don't know who it is. I don't know what it is. But no author has ever said, if I could just change one life, it'll all be worth it. That's not true. You want to sell millions of copies of your book. You want to transform lives all over the world. That's part of human nature. But I'm hoping that I'm a conduit for my creator to push this out to somebody, that maybe you can take this knowledge and put it to use for yourself. But the fact is, when you're at the top, you're probably more vulnerable to this imposter syndrome than anything else. When you're a leader of the organization, you start thinking, I don't know why anybody's listening to me. Sooner or later, somebody's going to figure out that I don't know what I'm talking about. And I think just the knowledge of saying it's okay not to know everything, but it's really cool to know a lot, that's really empowering. I do know a lot. I don't know everything. Some of the stuff that I've talked about today, here's what I know about this audience. 20% of you people are going to take some of the stuff that we talked about. You're already on it. You've been writing notes. Hopefully you pulled over on the car. But you've been taking notes. You've been maybe putting some notes in your phone. You're going along. You're recording something for yourself. I need to do this later. You're on it. You're ready to go. 20% of you are thinking, man, Ted is an idiot. I don't think he has a clue of what's going on. This is terrible. And then there's 60% of you who are thinking, that sounds pretty cool. And you'll never think about this podcast again. So I got a challenge for you. You 60%ers who think this is kind of cool. Stop this episode when you get somewhere you can stop it and write down one thing that you could do from some of these top stuff we talked about change, about perfection, about being vulnerable, about your imposter syndrome, and one thing you're going to do to improve that challenge that you have, or some goal that you've been thinking about. Just write down one thing you want it to be, and then write down what that next best step is. That's something Adam Schmela talks about a lot. It's that next best step. Or what's the next logical step is what I learned when I was going through the process with Michael Hyatt. So I hope today was helpful. It was really good for me because I just needed to get this out and need to get back started again. Again, please leave us a review and a rating. It doesn't have to be 5-star. I hope it is, but I would really rather have an honest one. I'd love to have some feedback, no matter what your podcast player of choice is. I've got some other episodes coming up soon, so thank you very much for your time, and I can't wait to hear what I got to say next.